Franchise Show. This is the show, and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's the 14th of April at 5:15 if you're in the UK, 6:15 if you're in France, 12:15 if you're in bits of America, and all sorts of other times around the world, I guess. And because it's live, we love you to get involved. So do say hello, pop in a comment, and get involved in our conversations. So what do? Each week on the Franchise Show, we take a new topic and we take a lovely guest. Today, in fact, two lovely guests. And we have a bit of a deep dive into that subject. And I say this every week, but you are the directors and the producers of this, because we generally go the way that you want to go if you're here live. So if you want to direct our conversation, then please do and get involved by popping up a comment. So what's the topic today? Today we are talking about territory division for an emerging franchise brand. And to talk about that, we have our territory expert, Laurent Leclerc. Great to have you with us, Laurent.
Hi, Harvey. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Great to have you with us. And we got Steve Hopper from Plan Burrito. Steve, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Hello again. How are you doing?
Yes, of course. Both returning guests. Steve was, of course, on our sister show, the QSR show, and was our first guest on that. And we're about to do this month episode 4 of that one. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic to have you both with us. So before we get into the conversation today, perhaps you could both do a little introduction to yourself. Lots of people will know you, of course. But for those who don't and people who are watching this in the future, let's start with Laurent.
Hi, everyone. So I'm the co-founder of Smappen. It's a franchise territory mapping software and location analysis. We're currently working with over 500 franchise brands, mainly in Europe and North America.
Fantastic. Amazing. Great introduction. And same thing for you, Steve. Just to give a little introduction, again, lots of people will know you, but just give a little introduction to yourself and to your business. And I've just got your lovely logo the right way around for you there as well. Look at that. Spun you around.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I'm Steve. I'm the CEO and founder of Plan Burrito. Currently, we have 14 stores trading. We should be to minimum of 20 stores by the end of 2026. Started franchising in 2022, and we actually do some work with Lauren with Smappen as well, in terms of territory mapping and stuff. So yeah, we're all kind of equated.
Fantastic. I mean, it's great to get the perspective of both of you on this. I mean, we're talking today about dividing up territory when you're starting a franchise brand, but of course, this is probably going to be a wider subject and as you're growing your brand, and as I said to you at the beginning, at 14 and now 20 by the end of the year, you're really perhaps helping to advise some emerging brands that are coming in as to how to do it properly. Let's welcome somebody who's joined us already live today. Let's welcome Johnny Joseph to the show. He's put hi from a very happy Leeds United fan in sunny Los Angeles. Well, look, fantastic to have you with us, Johnny, as always, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Johnny is in the franchise auditing space, and I can't remember how he wished me to describe it. Johnny, put up another comment to describe exactly how you would like me to describe what you do, and that would help me out a lot. But great to have you with us, of course, Johnny. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We got Simon Wise with us. Simon is a regular supporter of the show. he has put hello franchise friends from the beautiful shores of the River Colne in a full view of the landfill site where the discarded shopping trolleys glisten in the morning sunshine. Beautiful. Just, I mean, you know, you can picture the image, can't you? Great to have you with us, Simon. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how we divide up our territories as we're growing our franchise brands. There we go. Right. Johnny is a royalty auditor. There you go. Sounds good, Johnny, and thanks for that. That helped me out a lot. Maybe I should write things down. You never know. But why do that? Well, look, let's get into this. Let's perhaps start with Steve, and let's take you back a little bit to the beginning when you started things and when you were looking at territories. So not right at the beginning, but when you started to look at how you were dividing up the territories, what did you kind of think? How did you sort of set that out? And did you seek expert advice from Laurent right at the beginning, or did you give it a sort of a go yourself first?
I think with anything with franchising or building a brand, you start yourself and you always try and do it yourself, because half the time you're not aware that there's a professional advisor out there for that specific trade that you need. So, I mean, at the very beginning of a brand, when you're looking at the territories, it's really a lot more simpler, because it's not a congested market. For instance, you know, someone wants to open in Nottingham, then the territory that you give them in the franchise agreement would be, you know, the postcode of their unit and then a 5-mile radius, say. So I think it becomes a lot more important when you get into the size we are now, where you've got a lot of franchise inquiries coming through, and you're obviously obligated by the territory which you have put in your franchise agreement. Especially when you're talking to area developers who want to open up multiple sites. So we started using Smappen, basically so we could start mapping territories which tie into the franchise agreement. And by doing so, we make sure that we're not going to have any conflicts of interest when we're opening up in a neighbouring town, for instance. So that will tie in with the agreement, and it makes everything a lot more crystal clear, especially when you're in regions like London where it's very congested, you know. And the way we chose to do it using the Smappen software is by postcode, because you've got clear distinguishing lines that you can work by there. Whereas if you're going on a radius base, you know, draw 2 radiuses and you've always got a crossover, and it can become quite messy in the middle there. So yeah, it's we're finding it important now as we're growing to the numbers that we are, and we're getting you start to find that when you've opened up a store somewhere, someone goes into that store, loves what you do, then they want to open one, and they're usually local to where that store is. So then you've got someone else open up, and you know, that's why most of our stores are, you know, in the south, because, you know, it's feeding off its own reputation and growing organically that way. But now we have to be very careful about what we're doing when it comes to the territories.
That's really interesting, actually, particularly what you said there about the fact that obviously users, people who come to your restaurants to eat and enjoy the experience, then perhaps want to become franchisees. And I'd never really thought about it in that way, that's one of the reasons that it's not just because it's the next town or it's convenient for you. That's one of the reasons why organically businesses tend to grow in geographically tight areas, and it's an interesting one to think of. What's your sort of early take on this, Laurent, based on what Steve's just said there? I think it's really interesting when he said about the fact that might be something you do, radiuses, right? But that doesn't work because circles don't necessarily fit together particularly well, do they?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but especially in the QSR. Some people do that at the start, mainly because also for deliveries, like Uber and delivery companies often work using circles to define the delivery areas. So it fits also with the with the delivery companies, but it's not a really good idea because, as Steve said, they don't fit well together, and the risk is that you very quickly are going to have white spaces, as it's impossible to cover the whole territory with a circle. So, yeah, I would really recommend to use postcodes. It's the best way to go. But I think one of the most challenging thing at the very beginning when you start is to understand and to know your success criteria that you need to know uh, to know how you can size your territories, because territories should be not too small, because otherwise you have a risk that the franchisee probably won't be successful, and not too large, because otherwise could be an issue in your development. Like, once all territories are sold, it's over, development is over. So if they're too big, you won't have any more space for other franchisees, and moreover, it could happen that within the territory, the franchisee is attracting only a part of the potential customer. So it's just wasted potential. So you have to be really careful that the territories are not too small and not too big. And the difficult part is knowing how to size the territories. So mastering your key success criteria. And at the beginning, it's very tricky, because you don't have a lot of experience, like one, two, three locations, and it's difficult to generalize to the whole country, because some towns are different, some etc. So you need at the beginning to make assumptions. Yeah, a few things you can measure objectively, like ideally if you have customer data to assess where your customers are coming from, how far, to assess your typical influence area, like if customers are coming from maximum 30 minutes drive time, you know that it's not relevant toward a territory that is wider, is bigger than 30 minutes drive time, for instance. So the first thing you need to know is, it's like, what's my typical catchment area? And then you need to find your success criteria as, what's a viable territory? I mean, what should I have within a territory to make it viable? And it's not easy to find when you have few locations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you made some really interesting points there. Before we get into those, let's just say hello to a couple more people and pop up another couple of comments. Johnny's come back with making fun of me, Simon. No, Simon was making fun of Joe Caruso, actually, but Joe always has a wonderful way of describing where he lives, and he always sets me the challenge of trying to pronounce where he lives. And I tend to get a score. We have Amadia with us from Canada. Love the Fleetwood Mac shirt, Harvey Fleetwood Mac rules. Absolutely, there you go. Fantastic and great to have you with us, Amaya. In fact, she's put morning from Vancouver. I'm a franchise development rep looking for a top shelf brand in their growth phase and who is ready to explode. Well, I wanted to put that up there as well, because I love to help people that are looking for their next opportunity. So please reach out to Amaya if you are looking for somebody in Canada. And we have got Sadaf with us. Fantastic to have you with us. Sadaf, of course, from Chicken Cottage. She's put, hello, everyone. Great topic today, Harvey. Well, thank you very much. Great to have you with us. And it's only great because of all of you. So looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts. And of course, Sadaf's thoughts on territory division as Chicken Cottage grew back in the day. So looking forward to hearing that. We've got a question coming up from Simon, so we'll get to that in a moment. We've got the lovely Lisa Feverick with us. Always good to have you with us, Lisa. Lisa helps women who are going through the menopause with dietary advice. So fantastic to have everyone here. And let's have a little look at Simon's question. Simon has put, how do you avoid the subway legacy where territories were oversold and franchisees were competing head on with each other on the same high street while scaling your QSR brand to its full potential? It's an absolutely fantastic question. And I was going to say actually that as you're growing, when you're setting out these territories, and both Laurent and Steve have made really good points so far about this, but it's very tempting at the beginning, especially if you have a sort of services based business, not so much with not so much with something that's location based and bricks and mortar, but it's tempting to give out bigger territories at the beginning because there's a perception of that being better value. You get a bigger territory, more opportunity. But you've got to be very careful doing that. If you give away too much at the beginning, like Lauren said, then there's possibilities then of people not doing the best with that territory. What do you make of this question? Let's go with Steve first.
Yeah, I mean, Subway's renowned for this. It's for me, it was greedy. It was a greedy approach, without thinking about the individual franchisees. And I think it became massively obvious when COVID hit. And, you know, you weren't relying on people walking into your store because they did have the brand power, you know. So you could have a Subway down the road, you know, and they'd both be full because it's a Subway, right? But when COVID hit, obviously everyone was on delivery, and then the franchisees became competitors, and massive competitors, because they didn't have any of the revenue stream, you know, from walk-ins. And I think that's when it really hit Subway hard. You know, I had quite a lot of people offering me to buy their Subway store for 10 grand. And, you know, I wasn't interested, because the territories were congested. It was greedy, you know, and it should have never been like that. You know, it's so important that the franchisees have got their fair share of the market. Now, at the beginning, when you've got a small brand, you know, you haven't got that problem, because people don't say ultimately, "Oh, Plan Burrito," because we're nowhere near as known as what Subway was. Once your brand's more established, then you do have more people coming in. But the issue is, I think Subway did really get greedy with it. You know, I think the only way that might have worked in any circumstances is if it was an area developer franchise agreement where the one franchisee owns the cluster of stores. Otherwise, you're battling against your own brand.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, you know, because look, cities, let's take London as a good example of this, but cities are so dense. And like you say, pre-COVID, there were so many. You take Pret a Manger as a good example of this as well. You know, there might have been 10 Prets on one busy London road, right? And pre-COVID, they were all absolutely doing completely fine. A little bit different because it's a company-owned model, or back then it was. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Then when you're then relying on delivery, you start competing with your fellow franchisees. What do you make of this question, Lauren?
Well, I think I mean, what Steve says is really interesting. In a way, it seems logical to after a while, once the brand is established, brand awareness grows, to have a higher density. It's normal at the beginning to have, let's say, bigger territories, because it's more difficult to attract people to your restaurant, if we're talking about a restaurant. So, and as your brand awareness grows, then your penetration rate within a territory will become better, higher, so you can have smaller territory. So it's logical to increase the density as the brand awareness grows. I mean, but you have to, I mean, yeah, you have to be reasonable and to mitigate risk, I would say, and not go too far on that point. So you need to fine tune this to make sure that the territories are not too small, and maybe to always keep a margin to make sure they'll be viable. Because the first thing you need to have is viable franchises, otherwise your brand is dead.
Yeah, absolutely. One question I was going to ask you, Steve, because I think this is a really interesting one, particularly with a QSR bricks and mortar type business. When you're looking at a postcode, there are hundreds, thousands of postcodes. Some of those postcodes are dense with population that is right for a QSR brand that sits within, your customer profile, whatever we're going to call that. And some, of course, aren't. Are you quite selective? Is there going to be quite a lot of, when you're at, let's call it maximum capacity here in the UK, do you think that there will be areas that will never really be able to have the brand, or do you think it's open to a wide demographic?
No, I think it's open to a wide demographic. I think that more comes down to your business model. Can your business model survive in an area that's not as densely populated? We, for instance, we run in villages, and that's only because our labour costs are low, and our fit out costs are low. So it depends on the model. The model can make it work. I mean, in terms of the territory side of things, when it comes to that, when you've got a less dense model, you increase the territory so you can reach further. Or you have in your franchise agreement, you're giving them LE12, LE11, LE, however many postcode areas you want to give them. But actually, you don't restrain them to them territories. You allow them to go outside of them territories until you've got someone else who wants to come along and open up, in a neighbouring town or city, and then the territories come into play. So the territories will only ever come into play, really, if you've got another franchisee that's wanting to open up in a nearby town or city. It makes no sense to restrict the territory of a single unit at the beginning until that happens.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting, and I'll let Lauren go in a sec, but I think it was really interesting because you said at the beginning how your business was growing in terms of franchisees, because I would have thought initially, it's not a problem at the beginning because, you're going to have territories that are quite well spread out, so therefore it's pretty easy to find franchisees. But that's more if you went along the lines of finding a franchisee to match an area you're looking at going in, rather than finding a franchisee that's keen on the business that happens to want to be in that location. There's two different strategies there. What do you make of that, Lauren?
So just getting back to Steve's, what Steve said, like increasing the size of a territory to make it viable is not always the right solution, because increasing the size does not always increase the potential of a location. So like I said, for instance, if you're a QSR, people who drive no further than 10, 15 or 20 minutes, depending on your model and where your locations are. So thinking that, I need to reach 100,000 people, so let's give more postcodes. But if you add postcodes which are farther than your typical catchment area, nothing's going to happen. I mean, you want to give more potential. So there's a limit to that. I mean, it's not always the solution to say let's add more postcodes. I mean, and I think you need to accept that depending on your business model, you're totally right. There may be areas where you just can't have a viable territory or viable location. It's not possible because the income, it doesn't fit, or the dense population density doesn't fit with what you need to have a viable territory. So sometimes, there may be spaces where today you can't have a viable territory, but maybe tomorrow, as we said before, when your brand awareness grows, you'll be able to have a higher penetration rate, and then maybe in smaller places it could become viable, but maybe later. So that's why usually you start with the highest potential places to make sure it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to that, I mean, I was taking, for instance, Uber Eats now will deliver food half hour away from the restaurant.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't limit the Uber distance if they're not invading anyone else's territory. So although you're saying this person may live here or may live there, yes, they wouldn't drive to the store, Lauren, but they would order a delivery.
Yeah, but it's
So
the same for the delivery. It means that you will not award postal codes that are outside the Uber delivery area, for instance, because no one will either come or order. So there's always a limit to the size. Otherwise, operating costs or just people will not come or not order.
Yeah,
I think this is a really interesting point you've made here about delivery aggregator platforms when you're talking about bricks and mortar QSR, because when you're talking about people coming to the restaurant, like Laurent said there, maybe 10, 15 minutes, although they are destination venues. I've certainly traveled further. I mean, I've traveled 220 miles to go to a restaurant once. That was quite unique. But I think it's a really interesting one, because if you get a location and you've got a Plan Burrito in a location, and you say, okay, well, that's your postcode, and actually we're going to give you these 4 postcodes at the moment, okay? And they feel a bit protected. They feel like they've got this region, okay? But actually Uber might say, okay, well, we're delivered to that within 30 minutes driving distance, traveling distance. So it may well be that the postcode area you've given the franchisee and the Uber radius, I'm going to call it a radius, it's the wrong word, the Uber area delivery time, that might be bigger, and therefore the Uber delivery zone might encroach on another franchisee. Do you think that could become a challenge?
Well, you can control it. So say if you have got a neighbouring franchise and we know that they've got the postcode, then Uber can split it like that. But on their standard setup, no, they just give you a radius. And this is what I'm saying. Sometimes that Uber radius is bigger than the territory you give that restaurant. And if they've got no restaurants around there, then you're not going to tell Uber to reduce their radius. You're going to cash in on the people who's ordering that's outside of the territory.
Yeah. I mean, do you, when you're picking, I mentioned earlier about whether you think to yourself, right, we want Plan Burritos in these areas across the country, or do you think we want great franchisees for Plan Burrito, and then we're fitting the areas around that? What's your strategy at the moment? Is it location based and then find a franchisee to suit that area, or is it the other way around? Find a great franchisee and then see what area they want to open in?
Yeah, so currently we find a great franchisee and look for the best areas around where they're based, where they can easily get to the store, where they can easily operate it, where it's not taking too much out of their home life. We don't want them traveling, an hour in the morning to get to the shop and an hour back, So we find the right franchisee, and then we look at the areas and use mapping to get population, or is it highly student populated, is it this, is it that. We also look at, and I know you were saying, we were talking about is any areas just a no-go. Well, a lot of franchisees want to be owner operators, where they work in the business themselves and they have it as their own little business. That's good to generate themselves a little income, and it's just like any other coffee shop or non-branded kind of QSR or cafe or whatnot that you see in all these villages. So as long as your operating costs are low and your labor costs are low and everything else like that, then it can work just as a small business there. As a person investing in a brand that wants to make a big impact, that's no-go. They're not going to, be able to afford to put a manager in there and pay management wages and, grow the brand to get multiple locations. If they've put one, in the middle of nowhere, it's just not going to work. So back to your question, we go with finding the right franchisee, and then we advise them on the territories that they could service best.
I think it's a good strategy because at the beginning, I mean, you got space everywhere, so it's when you have a good candidate, it's at the beginning it's quite easy to find a territory that fits with the candidate. Yeah, I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah, I think so. And look, we're talking today about territory division for emerging franchise brands. And if someone's listening today and they've just created their brand either on their kitchen table or a back of a napkin somewhere, or it's still in your head, it's some really interesting advice. I think probably, and it'd be interesting to hear Steve's thoughts on this, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I think probably the strategy may change as the brand grows, because at the moment what you're looking for is strong franchisees that are aligned with your vision, your brand, that you get on with well to form the base of your business, the foundation of your business, right? And with those strong people, you can grow. You can't grow a business based on a good geographical area, possibly or possibly not. I think it's certainly the wisest choice, what you're doing now. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But if you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show. And today we are talking about territory division with an emerging franchisor. And we have the lovely Steve Hopper from Plan Burrito. And we've got the lovely Laurent Leclerc from Smappen talking about this very subject. It's been a very interesting conversation so far. If you're here live listening to this, please pop in a comment, get involved, and direct our conversation. It would be great to hear your thoughts. We've got a good comment coming up now from Sadaf and another one from Simon, and we're going to get to those right now. So let's have a look at Sadaf's comment here. She's put, when we started expanding some 20 years ago, we were growing very rapidly. But even then, we used the 2-mile radius rule when allocating territories. Nowadays, we allocate a drive time between 2 franchisees to minimize competition amongst themselves on delivery platforms. Yeah, it's interesting because, Steve, you mentioned about drive time as well. I know you mentioned at the moment you're looking at postcodes. Did you consider the travel time as a way of dividing up territories?
Not really, because if I was to drive 2 mile in London, it could take me 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. If I was doing 2 mile in anywhere else, well, apart from major cities like Birmingham and places like that, then you could do 2 miles in 2 minutes, So drive time for me, I mean, Chicken Cottage, massive. They probably way ahead of, well, they are way ahead of, Plan Burrito in terms of brand size. But yeah, it wouldn't be something that I looked at personally, but that's not criticizing it. No, I'm possibly wrong. I
think the thing with this is there are different ways of doing this, and it's what suits you as a business as well. And it was really interesting to hear Sadaf's evolving story there, how it was simple radiuses, because when you're thinking about it, it's the simplest thing to do, to just get a compass and draw around a map or whatever you would have done if there weren't mapping software at the time. But things can get, it gets more complicated in a good way as things evolve. I mean, when I was working for Coffee Republic and we were looking at stores within London, I think we used to do sort of 5 minutes walking distance, because that's huge in central London. In some areas, that's, you've got such density. But then if it was a town, you might not have more than one location in that town because it just couldn't support it in terms of the population in that town. But look, it's a great one. We're here today to talk about this, to throw some ideas around from some experienced operators and get people's thoughts on how they would do it. So I love this. I love the fact that you're doing it one way with Plan Burrito, that Chicken Cottage have done it another way. And there's no necessarily any right or wrong ways, but it's great to sort of listen to these ideas and to see how they might fit with your businesses. Let's have a look now at a comment here from Simon. Simon has put, Laurent, how does Smappen work to fully utilize the capabilities of third-party delivery companies They seem to have a huge impact on territory planning. Yeah, I mean, you know, we touched on this earlier, actually, and it's a really important one, isn't it? To work, you know, especially when we're talking about QSR, and let's stick with that, and restaurant brands and hospitality, you know, because delivery aggregator platforms, Just Eat, Deliveroo, etc., they are really important in terms of they're making up, in some cases. I work with a company that 95% of their business was done on deliveries. It wasn't an aggregator platform, but it was deliveries. So what do you make of this, and how has this impacted your business and how you work with QSR and hospitality brands?
Most of the times, this, like I said previously, this platform use radiuses, like distance radiuses, like circles, to define the delivery areas. So it's just something like, if your business relies also on deliveries, it's just something you need to take into account in your when you assess the potential for new locations. So it means that you have to assess both your catchment area. Like, usually a catchment area is in the walking time or drive time, because it's the closest model you can find to a catchment area, to assess the potential for, I mean, people coming to your store. Then you have like a second business, which is deliveries, and you will have another area that could be a circle, and it's the sum of the two that will allow you to assess the potential for the area. So it's a bit more complex, because you have like two different businesses, and to assess the potential, you have to take into account the sum of these two elements.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, when you've found an ideal franchisee, and they're in this location, or this is where they're looking at opening, and how do you take a region, an area, and find the best location? You know, do you use do you use the software for that? Do you visit? Is it a combination of the two? What's your sort of process to try and find a good location within a postcode area?
So we would usually obviously look at the maps personally ourselves. We'd even go onto Street View on Google. We'd do some Google research. We'd do some AI research, because that can pull quite a few figures. We use Smappen now to give us more information on how wealthy the areas are. You know, are people employed? What's the age range demographics? You know, you're not really going to put a smash burger joint, say, in a old age pensioners home, because it doesn't interest them. You know, so we look at everything like that. Once we've narrowed it down to a few locations or a few towns or whatnot, we'll then head out and go and see the areas ourselves, and we'll put it out to our property finders to find properties in these areas, and then we go from there. It also depends on what kind of franchisee it is as well. So, for instance, if it's a franchisee that's not part of an area development agreement, then we wouldn't look at chucking them in the centre of Birmingham, for instance, because we would like to keep that for area development agreements, where you can have 4 or 5 stores in that town, and you've got one person that develops that. So we're also cautious about the areas that we're permitting the Z franchisee to open.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. And I think that comes in time as you're developing a brand. I think at the beginning, you're very happy to take on board owner-operators who are fantastic, because you can align with that person for a particular site, and they, as I said before, they create that foundation. But as you're evolving, like you say, you take then a big area and you actually think, well, now where the type of franchisee we're looking for this area is an area developer, is a multi-site, is someone who's got the infrastructure to operate a multi-site business. So it's a really interesting one. Let's have a look. We've got some more comments coming in. Let's We've got one from Johnny,
Maybe
one from
we just
Simon, and from
we
Amanda.
can just bounce on the question also to what we usually recommend to find the best locations. I think the first is know your success criteria, and once you know them, you can, for instance, in our app, you can create a model. Let's say I'm targeting specific people with specific income, whatever. Once you know your target, you can just map them with a heat map, density map, to know where are the people, where is your target, and where's the highest density of your target. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is look at your competitors. I mean, big brands that are competitors. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, I'd say. But if they're around, there's a market. It's probably an interesting place. Or even better, know your what we call your mirroring brands. So these are brands that have the same ICP, same target, but who are not competitors. So as an example, um, I'm selling healthy food. Okay, could be interesting to be close by a yoga center or something that is targeting the same people but not offering the same services or products. So locating these interesting neighbors is also a way to find where you can find interesting places and where there is a market. So these are a few tips you can use: mapping your mirroring brands, mapping your competitors, or just looking at the distribution of your targets on the map.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. What do you make of that, Steve? Particularly the mirroring. I really like that. I mean, I'm thinking, because I'm in the world of coffee, I'm thinking you might have a coffee brand, and maybe you might look at a bakery brand, or maybe you might look at somebody who wants to kind of stay awake late at night, and it's not quite the same. Have you ever thought about that in terms of when you select things? Is it come into your site selection criteria?
Yeah, so we look.
Laurent.
Yeah, no, we look at all that as well when we delve deeper in there. I mean, look, if you put your brand next to a KFC, KFC's done a huge due diligence on them sites anyway. They're not just going to put them anywhere. And not only that, but we leverage off bigger brands, for instance, now, because we call them what we call anchor brands. Though it attracts a lot of customers there, and yes, they're going to that brand, but they'll notice your brand, and they will. If you've got a good brand like and a good product like what we have, someone will try the product and they'll enjoy it, and then one day they'll go to KFC, and the next day they'll go Plan Burrito. The next day they'll go Subway. Next day they'll go to Plan Burrito. They leverage off each other, and Lauren mentioned about you can see your competitors on there and stuff like that, which is good as well, because especially in my game, when I opened up Plan Burrito 10 years ago, burritos weren't really well known in the marketplace. But if I put our Holborn store, which is around the corner from Tortilla and down the road from Taco Bell, I think in that sense, as long as you've got a good product, one day people might go to Tortilla, one day they might go to Plan Burrito, one day they might fancy a bit more of a budget friendly one and go to Taco Bell. It's still spreading.
Definitely, it brings people into an area, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Who are wanting to eat. So therefore, competitors help each other. Because people have just got to go to one region. That's where the restaurants are. That's where the bars are. That's where the sports things are. It doesn't matter what it is, but it helps the customers know where to go and what to do. I like it. Let's have a look. We've got a question here from Johnny. It might have to be the last one. We're coming towards the end of the first section of today's show. Johnny has put, in my experience, franchisors don't spend a lot of resources in monitoring or enforcing territory restrictions. Please discuss. Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose this is really relevant with a business that has, let's say, a mobile van, or where that van can go anywhere it wants, really. It's perhaps not as relevant when you've got a bricks and mortar QSR, because once you're in a place, that's where you're in. But I suppose maybe we could look at this from an advertising point of view, where you've got a franchisee that is trying to reach a target community. Do you control their local marketing boundaries so that they can't sort of reach people in towns where other franchisees are? Or do you find you don't really have to control this once someone's opened?
Is that to me?
Yeah, I'll put that to you, Steve. I realised I was looking at you and you can't flash my eye.
No, I think it's a good question. I think if you've got territories close to each other, and what we encourage our network to do, because we encourage our network to talk to each other, and if you've got people in close vicinity to each other, then we'd always say get your collaborate on marketing, because when you collaborate, it works good for both your stores. When it comes to territory, enforcing things to do with the territory, I think he was right. What Johnny said, franchisors don't really enforce it. However, you need to have the protection there for the franchisees. So if a franchisee was being invaded from another franchisee out in their territory, then you've got a problem. And as a franchisor, it's your duty to make sure you enforce breach of contract if they are going to be invading other people's territory. Otherwise, it's a free for all. It becomes a Hunger Game, and you've got to be stern on that. Luckily, like we said, if we've got marketing in A and a store in B, and they're close to each other, we always say to them from a head office, collaborate on a marketing campaign. If you're doing a fly distribution, collaborate on it, because one, distribution is cheaper, printing's cheaper, and the reach is bigger. So yeah,
I like that. I think collaborating. I've been trying to think of something that rhymes with it. Collaborate, don't retaliate. How about that?
I like it. Yeah.
Well, look, we have come to the end of the first part of today's show. So we are now going to go to the part of the show where I have to turn my camera off. Now I'm gonna click this carefully, because the last 2 times I didn't do it. Yes, that's all good, because you cannot see me. Well, apparently you can now, but without wearing a hat. So now I have this beauty on here. And this part of the show is, of course, brought to you by PJ Murphy and Sons Bespoke British Hatters. And it's my lovely friend, Paul Murphy. So if you'd like a hat like this one, then please reach out to Paul. Now, this is also the part of the show where we stop talking about territory and we find out a little bit about our guests. Now, Laurent has been subject to this before, so I'm going to let him get away with it today. So we're going to ask Steve a couple of questions. This is also the part of the show where Steve can get his own back on me and ask me anything he likes. So Steve, I'm going to start with asking you, have you ever met anyone famous? Have you got a claim to fame, or have you got some sort of crazy, interesting hobby that we don't know about you?
This is tricky. I haven't met him, but I did bump into Tyson Fury the other week. But bigger than that, really? I think we had one of the Teletubbies come into our store. And we only knew, obviously, they weren't wearing the Teletubby outfit, but they were the people who was in, I think it was,
really?
Is it Dipsy?
Dipsy.
Yeah.
I like that one.
So that's the claim to fame. I was just blown away. I thought,
That's really good. That's really good.
So yeah.
How did you know that? How did that come up that you knew that they were a Teletubby?
Because we're in hospitality, and a lot of people forget that we talk to the customers. We have a conversation with the customers, and quite often we know a lot about the customers. So we have these conversations, and it's surprising how many people you meet and their background as well.
I love it. I love it. Brilliant.
We've met a real life Teletubby.
I think that's fantastic. Look, I promised you as well that you could get your own back on me. You can let me get away with it if you wish. No one has so far. But you can now ask me any question you like, and I'll give it a go at answering.
This has put me on the spot. I'm trying to think.
You can let me. It could be a first. Let me get away with it. Go on.
Well, no. Would you rather have a vertical mouth or vertical eyes?
You know what? I don't know if anyone ever listens to Richard Herring, right? But that reminds me of a Richard Herring emergency question. So you're going to need to check that out. So vertical head, mouth. Okay.
Yeah, vertical mouth or vertical eyes.
It's a really good question. So would I only be able to sort of see through thin slots? Is that how that would work?
Well, yeah, but you could also look left and right easier.
Okay. So, okay. No, vertical eyes.
I think like a lizard.
Yeah. Okay. I now got it right. I think I'm going to go for the eyes. Yeah. Because
why?
Because I think the mouth might affect things that I might be able to eat. It's just a sort of long, thin mouth. I wouldn't be able to,
steep on the side.
Yeah. How would you get a burrito into that?
Just in one. Just took it straight down.
You would have to make a flat, really long burrito for me, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm glad you've answered that. I'm going to sleep well tonight anyway.
Well, that was
you've answered the question.
And I really don't think I'm ever going to be asked that one again. So I really like that one. So fantastic. Well, look, we have come to the end of today's show. So it leaves me, first of all, to thank everyone who has been here live today. Thank you for joining in, for getting involved, putting up your questions. And for everyone who watches this in the future, please pop in a comment. We can still look at those in the future. And of course, I'd like to thank our lovely guests, Steve and Laurent, for their time and for their input. Thank you both very much.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Harry.
Excellent. Well, that just leaves me to say what's happening next week. So next week on the Franchise Show, we're talking about franchise information, what information you need to get, what information you should give, what you should do with that information. And we have to talk about that, the lovely Joe Caruso and Neil Newman. So that's going to be a fantastic conversation. So please join us next Tuesday, the 21st of April at 5:15 p.m. GMT and 12:15 EST. Also, if you are heading to the Franchise Show in London Excel, I will be there. Look out for the hat. Have to wear it everywhere now. And enjoy that if you're going. So until next time, my friends, take very good care.